Mr. Gordon Bizar. We're here today on this beautiful yacht. We have an excellent show coming up. He's going to teach you how to either start your business, grow it out of control, get off the narrow road, go on the super highway of growth, and get real. Get real. Get uncomfortable and get real. And we're going to do it with some formulas, easy ways, easy tasks, okay? And you've done it. So it's not like we're sitting here.
It's better than I've done it.
Yeah.
I work with people every day who are millennials, who are in between, boomers.
Yeah.
And they've done it. So we're going to talk about how they did it too.
Oh my God. This is going to be awesome. You stay tuned on a beautiful yacht. The name of it is
Casino Royale.
I feel like James Bond. We got to do the turn.
I am Stacey A. Cross, and there is no E in my name.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time you're watching it is always the perfect time. I am Stacey A. Cross, and there is no E in my name. I'm sitting here with Mr. Gordon Bizar, and I am on a beautiful yacht. And for my comfort killers, we did a few Facebook Lives. You guys seen the pictures, so you kind of know where I am, but you really don't know who I'm sitting with. I kind of kept you a secret. I apologize. I did.
Oh, okay.
Kept you a secret for this day. Mr. Gordon Bizar is an entrepreneur, an expert in business acquisition. You have a 50-year success track record, which I can only imagine. I read your bio today. It took me 2 days to read the bio. There was so much gold in there. And I appreciate you inviting me on this beautiful yacht, the Casino Royale in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to sit here and actually teach me some things, open your mind a bit, and let me know what you know. So thank you for coming and visiting my comfort killers on Grant Cardone TV.
I can't tell you how big a pleasure it is for me to be here with you.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm here, and you're an amazing guy. You got a fun energy, kind of a giving spirit. I could feel that right off of the bat, and that's something that's kind of, I'm attracted to you.
Whoa.
I'm so attracted to you.
Whoa.
And what's beautiful is the detail of our backdrop, right? We're on a yacht, and I was asking the captain, how long does it take to build a boat like this with such grand detail? And they said about 2.5 years.
Right.
And when I think about, and put in business terms, how long does it take to develop a successful track record such as yours?
Well, it took me 50 years to develop the one that I got.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to take that long to develop a very successful track record. In fact, let me tell you a story.
Yeah.
Okay? We just are closing next week on a company that I'm acquiring along with some other partners. This is a guy who 5 years ago, it's a guy and his wife, 5 years ago they started a book selling company.
Okay.
And they went with Amazon to use Amazon to help them sell books, their platform. Okay. About 2.5 years into that, they realized they weren't going to sell a lot of books, that people weren't really reading books anymore. Okay. I'm buying his company for $14.5 million. This is 2.5 years after he made this big decision.
Right.
Went from $250,000 in sales to this last year. He just completed for this year $12,600,000 in sales.
Yeah.
And the company right now is selling at the rate. In other words, because there's a growth period, right? So each month he's been getting more and more and more and more, and it's just month over month after month of growth.
Right.
And right now, this month for January, he will do, because we've mapped it out. He's almost to the end, right?
Yeah.
He'll do over $2 million for this month. So even if he leveled out now, he'd still do $26 million, $24 million for this year.
Wow.
Okay.
That's amazing.
Okay. Now the best part of it is he's got a 30% profit margin. So 30% of that is profit.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
And you purchased?
I purchased the company. But you asked the question, how long does it take to go from, and I don't count when he started his first business, okay, because wasn't really working for him. 2.5 years ago, he went to doing nutritional supplements. And he researched the market to see where the trends were. He researched what platform he should be on. Of course, he came up with Amazon as being the best support platform. And so he knew the trends. He knew what products were selling into the marketplace. And he went out and researched the contract manufacturers so that he knew who was the best person or best companies to have it make his quality product. Made a quality product, almost no return rate. The products take off. No one returns them. Now he's getting subscribers who want to, just automatically reorder the product. So here's a guy that once he got his act together, once he realized that he had to do the research, he had to know the trends, he had to know where the market was going, he had to get quality manufacturers. He put all those pieces together in a matter of months, and then he repositioned that business to now do a phenomenal amount of sales and be phenomenally profitable. And then when he sells it, remember, he's not just making the money that he would make in a year. He's taking a multiple of that income. And the reason that he's selling, you're going to love this, is because he now has reached the level of his core competency and skill set. In other words, what's he good at? He's good at recognizing the need for a product, researching the trends, putting the pieces together, marketing it, and that's it. So his business now, to go on to its next level, he's not the right person to take it on to the next level because his skill set's now been optimized out. Right. He needs people who know how to scale the business, how to add additional marketing channels, how to create inventorying systems and management systems, and all. He doesn't know that stuff. So he doesn't have to know that stuff. He just had to know how to get this thing up and running and really successful. So everybody's got a core competency and a skill set, and the biggest challenge you have is to recognize what it is, and then look at the business world out there and understand where it is that you can apply that core competency and that skill set where it will optimize for you the most amount of earnings and the most amount of wealth creation. And that's what we help people do.
Well, that's awesome, because what you're telling me is he's great at something. And we optimize that thing. He does not need to go try to scale it, get inventory, get a whole factory.
Well, let me tell you what we did. We worked out an agreement with him, which we call a joint venturing agreement. Because the thing I asked him is, what do you love to do most? Okay, well, he says, I love, and then, starting them and developing them and all that. And I said, well, what if you just stayed with the company? We didn't buy the full company. We just bought a portion of it, and you stayed as our partner, and that was your job, and then we took over all the other things. Well, he didn't like that because, in his mind, he couldn't retain his independence. He didn't want to be responsible to anyone. He didn't want to report to anyone. And I respect that in entrepreneurs. That's what usually makes good entrepreneurs. And so we set up a joint venturing agreement with him where he's not obligated to show up. It gets paid on what it produces. He develops the product, gets it into the marketplace. It's our product when it's developed. We own it, okay? But he now gets a royalty on that, and then that royalty goes into his company, and it's a very significant royalty. I can't tell you what it is, but it's very significant.
I'm sure.
And then within 3 to 5 years after he's received that money during that time, we buy it from him for 2.5 times what we call EBITDA. So he turns it into capital gains for a big number at the end of that period of time. So it's the same as him being our partner. But he has no responsibility for the company. Nobody's not reporting to anybody. He has exactly what he wants. And my whole theory of business is a business is an incredible structure. That if you understand it, you structure your business to give everybody who you want to do business with what they want. And by understanding what they want, you're not wasting assets or resources giving them things they don't put a value on. They're strictly targeted to giving them what they want. So now you can give everybody what they want, make a lot of money for yourself, and you've got a marvelous business that everybody loves being part of.
Well, is this a part of the National Diversified, your company, National Diversified?
Yeah, well, National Diversified has several training programs. One of them is named after me. It's called Bizar Financing. And that's where I teach people how to use financial leverage to buy a business and how to do it when you don't have the cash.
Just exactly what you've done. With it.
Well, I bought this business. We have it totally financed by investors and lenders. Okay, so when I do it, in fact, I have a very good definition for an entrepreneur.
Tell me.
An entrepreneur, people think of him, well, I take risk, I put my little money in, I leverage my credit cards, I do this, I do that, and I build my business, and that's not an entrepreneur.
Well, who told me that? Okay, tell me.
Let me tell you what an entrepreneur is. An entrepreneur is a person with a vision that orchestrates the time, talent, and resources of other people to make their vision real. Because if you have a good vision, you don't have enough money to make it real. I have big visions that I don't have enough money to make real. Okay, so the question is the other part of that the corollary to that definition is people have everything you want. Whatever you would ever want, ever. A yacht,
I believe it. The yacht right here.
Somebody's got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And people will give you what you want if you give them what they want.
Right.
Okay. So the key is you structure your business that everything you need to orchestrate your vision, you develop the way to monetize it or to give other people what they want when they give you what you want. So if you're the visionary and you know how to orchestrate everybody's efforts, it all comes together, everybody gets what they want, and it's very successful. I mean, it almost sounds like, well, wow, that's too simple.
Right. Well, it seems like a sense of collaboration and partnerships. There's a lot
Right.
So who's buying?
Who's buying
Who's
which?
buying in this business of partnership and collaboration? Who are our clients? Is it the business?
No. The client, the partnering that goes on is designed to create the overall business. Now the question is, how do you structure it? Now, you and I have talked about strategic aggregation.
That's it.
Okay. So the question is let me back up.
Yeah.
Every 10 years I have to reinvent myself. And the reason for it is just look at the level of change that we experience. If I try to stay with a business model for more than 10 years, it's going to be obsolete.
Antiquated.
Yeah, it's just not going to serve the right market. It's not going to have the right resources. There's something going to be very wrong with it because things change.
Yeah.
So it used to be every 12 to 14 years I reinvented myself. Then it became every 10 years. Now it's down every 3 years.
Happening faster and faster. Yeah.
Yeah. So and you've got to look at, okay, what's happened to the marketplace since I did this, and you got to be willing to review. You got to be willing to let go of what you did that was successful, and get out in front of the next big thing, right? And you got to be able to figure out what it is. All right. So strategic aggregation, though, is a model that I've been working for 50 years. So the model has been improving. But what the model focuses on, the businesses that it goes after and what it does, has changed dramatically. But let me give you an idea what a strategic aggregation is. And again, it's a way of leveraging assets. It's a way of orchestrating other people's time, talent, and resources where you don't have to put up the money.
Right.
Okay. So one of the resources that we, and I'll go right here with this boat, this yacht.
Yeah.
Okay, this yacht is courtesy, right now, we have the pleasure of sitting here because I have a yacht partner who anytime I need a yacht, makes sure I have a yacht. Okay? So why is he willing to do that? What makes him think enough of me that if I need a yacht, Gordon, here's the keys.
You actually did something for him too.
Right,
well,
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take a look at it. Okay, so what a strategic aggregation is it's an organization or a collection of businesses that all service a common clientele. Not the same clients, but a common description of a client.
Right.
Okay? And then you create a mission for that group and then a marketing theme that enables them to work together in the way that takes every one of their individual client bases and makes those clients now the clients of all of them.
Awesome.
Okay? So if you've got 20 partners and each one is working on something that's related to this client, okay? But they are each coming from a different place and each have different clientele. They don't compete with each other, right? Because they're each doing something different. And what that enables them to do is to work together now so that we can make the client of this one the client of that one.
Absolutely.
Okay, now the question is, well, how do you do that? Okay, well, it required 50 years for me to perfect the structure. But all along the way, we made it work.
Yeah.
Okay, and basically, what it is you create a mechanism by which you cross-market all of these different services with a very common service. So let me give you an idea how we do it in this. This yacht is courtesy of Billionaire Lifestyles.
Yes.
Okay. Our partners are all people who provide services of one kind or another or products to very wealthy people. That's what they have in common. The mission is to make that client's lifestyle the most optimistically, the best, the easiest, the least stressful, the most convenient, the most happy to be their use of their wealth.
Absolutely.
And to protect their wealth and to make sure that their wealth continues to increase. Okay, so that's the common mission. Now, all the partners have something to do with that. Whether it's their yachts that they buy, their jets that they fly, their high-end real estate that they buy, you can go through the whole list, right? But all of them have different clients. So what is it that this mission is? Well, the mission is to make the wealthy person's life easy.
Easy, right.
Well, what would do that? Well, there's a function that would do that, and we call it a concierge, right? If there's one person that you could call, and you could say, John, I want to have a party for my 300 best friends. I need an island. Set it up.
Done.
Done, right? That's what you want.
Right.
Okay. Or, I'm thinking about buying a yacht. Put it together for me.
I need that.
Right. Okay. Now, what you need is somebody who not only just says, "Whoa, I'm going to go buy a yacht."
Yeah.
You need somebody now who has depth. Okay, has understanding of how this wealthy person needs to be served by that request. Because it has to be registered in a certain country, right? Because the country matters because of how the boat will be insured, how it's going to run. Where are you going to port this thing? Okay, how are you going to man it when it needs retrofitting? Where is it going to go? And how? I mean, you're in the shipping business when you own a yacht. I mean, you've seen this thing, right? You've been down in that engine room, you saw that.
Man.
Wow. So you're in the shipping business.
Right.
Okay, so you need somebody who can manage that whole operation for you. Well, the wealthy person doesn't want to be putting all those pieces together.
Right.
You don't want to worry about it, you just want to use the yacht.
And have someone that's doing it in their best interest.
Yeah,
Not just any
absolutely,
old person, right?
absolutely. Where it's based on a relationship, not a one-time purchase.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is about a relationship that totally serves this person, where nobody dares to screw up.
Yeah.
Because there's too many players here.
The pieces are
right.
complex.
Yeah. So now the question is, okay, so we create this concierge service, and now what we have is every one of our member of the strategic aggregation. Now, when I sell a boat, when I sell a yacht, along with the yacht comes a membership in a concierge billionaire's lifestyle, so that you don't have to worry about anything with this yacht, or your jet, or your cars, or your homes.
Get it.
Okay? You just make this one call, and there it is. Okay? And then we structure that out of a family office. So either they already have their own family office,
Right.
where they have their attorneys and their accountants
Yeah.
and people who help them manage their money, or they don't. If they don't have a family office, we have a multiple family office that we bring them into, so we can handle all those services for them. Okay? But if they already have their family office, we work within that family office to organize those people's time, so when the yacht gets bought, the accountant comes in, the lawyer comes in,
Yep.
everybody that has to be there and be part of it, but we've already been down this road, so we make everybody's life easy.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And we accomplish everything at the most efficient way. But the key to this, two keys. One key is that we now have 20 of our partners, all of them had their own client base. All of them giving away the concierge service with their product or their service. The concierge now becomes the course to every one of the other things
Right.
as needs develop. So we've developed a pathway to cross-market through the concierge. Now, the last item here, and I'm taking you down into the deep.
I'm deep.
All right, down into the deep dark secrets here,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so now the question is, well, all right, how do you monetize that?
Right.
Okay, because at the end of the day, these are all businesses. They want to know, okay, this is really great, but how do I make money out of this? Well, what we do is we create a pathway for what we call front-end compensation and back-end compensation.
Yeah.
The front end is anytime the concierge is bringing you new business, you're doing what you do and you're going to be making a profit.
Right.
If you found that client on your own, we don't have anything to do with that. That's between you and your client. So you make the money on them, but now that's all these new clients we're bringing you, right? Okay, so we ask you to split some of your revenue back to us.
Sure thing.
Okay, because we brought you the
Makes
client,
sense.
right? Okay?
Give and get.
But what do we do with it?
Yeah.
Okay, now, when every one of our aggregated partners brings a new client into the system, our system creates a tag on that client, which says that forever that party is the source of the client. And now, every time that client is buying something within our system, there's back-end revenue now going to that person. So the tail starts to wag the dog. In other words, we structure it so these people are going to make more money out of their passive back-end revenue that they don't have to do anything for, okay?
Yeah.
Than they make out of their front-end core business. So everybody, once they get this, they can't wait to get their clients into the
Sure
system
thing,
because
because
that's
it's gonna
all
keep- it's
just
gonna
they
keep-
start getting checks. Okay? So you have to have a business model that shows how everybody wins when they do what you want them to do.
Right.
Right? Okay? You have to have a model that gives a better service significantly to whoever the ultimate buyer is than the way they're doing it now. And if you're smart, you do it in a way that's disruptive. Meaning, if I build a business model and it's 10% better than what's out there, people's habit patterns are such they won't change.
Right.
For 10%,
There's no movement.
there's no movement.
Yeah.
However, if it's 4 times better,
Right.
it's like
Disruption.
I'm in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we have to make the model so that when people come into the model, it's like 4 to 5 to 10 times better than the way they used to do it.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Absolutely.
So that they're willing to take a little bit of risk, get a little bit uncomfortable,
get uncomfortable, guys.
Okay, a little bit uncomfortable because they want to embrace this new model now. It means they got to make a couple of little changes here, just a little change. And by the way, one of the other keys too is the concierge concept. Okay, if I ask the guy who's the yacht broker to say, oh, by the way, do you need a jet?
I got that too.
Okay, well, he's not going to say that.
Right.
His focus is on selling the yacht. The jet guy's focus is on selling the jet. And the jet guy doesn't know anything about the yachts, and the yacht guy doesn't know anything. And you can't do that. Okay? You can't build a system that asks people to do things that they are uncomfortable with,
right,
or just unknowledgeable about, not in the habit pattern of doing. They'll always go back to the way they used to do it. Okay? So we structure this so that we create this new person, this concierge person, who we recruit around certain sets of competencies and requirements.
Yes.
We train them, we work with them and supervise them and certify them. In other words, they got to pass tests.
Right.
Okay? So that when they're in that concierge position, they know exactly how to work with that client, exactly how to move that client from the product that they came from to the other products and services that they want, right? And they're trained for that, they're there for that, they want that, and they're well paid for that.
I could see how that...
Okay, so now we don't ask anybody to do anything that they don't like doing or don't want to do. We have a person that's specifically trained and already motivated and well paid to do what needs to be done. We've created massive back-end and front-end increase in revenues for these folks. And we give the client, whoever the client is, a much better quality of life and a much better enjoyment of their property and better value of higher values of protecting their property, higher ways to make money. And like as an example, part of our group is our private equity company.
Right.
Well, guess what? We see phenomenal investment opportunities. We can help people without a lot of risk make double sometimes and even triple what they normally make and not increase their risk at all for doing it.
Right.
So it's just one of the ways that we integrate ourselves and work with everybody.
But let me ask you a question, and thank you, because the strategic aggregation sounds like something that a lot of people will be interested in. Is it just for the billionaires, the millionaires, or anyone could really have a strategic aggregation?
We've created these in every industry you can think of. Let me give you an idea in real estate.
Oh, okay.
Okay, a lot of people love real estate, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Who is the central character in the world of real estate? Let's take homes. I want to buy a home. Who's the central character in that process?
You go to either I would say the home buyer.
Okay,
or the realtor.
well, the realtor. That's the key. I'm talking the business side. I mean, I want to buy or I want to sell.
Yep.
What do? I pick up the phone. I call a broker. Okay, they're the core of business of real estate, residential real estate purchases and sales, and usually they'll represent either the buyer or the seller, and sometimes they'll even represent both. Okay, but basically they either get a listing or they get somebody who walked in the door and says, I want to buy a house. Okay, so that's their marketing, right? That's their business today. Well, that's a perfect candidate for strategic aggregation around them. What about remodelers? What about movers? What about people who would do appraisals on a house? Do you think they ever see buyers and sellers? But they don't think of them as buyers and sellers. All they're there is collect their one thing that they do, and that's all, and they get to the sale and they stop.
Right.
Okay? But you must have 40 or 50 different services that all see real estate sellers or buyers either before the broker sees them, at or around the time the broker sees them, or sometime after the broker sees them. Because I'm a remodeler, I may have a person call me because the house looks terrible and they want to improve it in order to sell it.
Absolutely.
I could be a remodeler, person just bought this broken down house and they call me because they want to fix it up. Right? So I'm either seeing them before or after the sale. I'm either seeing the buyer or the seller, but I'm seeing one of these parties. And this is true for plumbers, electricians. I mean, you can go on and on and on about all the different services that you could wrap around a real estate business. Okay, now all these folks have clients. All these folks are seeing clients at or around the time they're buying a house. So they're all in a position to cross-refer to each other. They just don't know how to do it and do it efficiently. So we put in place a mechanism that enables the effective cross-marketing of all those services, and now everybody's clients become everybody else's clients. Okay, so all of a sudden they go from nominal sales to an explosion of new sales.
I definitely see how that could work, and you just took an industry like real estate. I could see how it could work in an industry I'm in, and of course the yacht business. And, but you know, you told me, you mentioned that you reinvent yourself, and it's all about strategic aggregation, because it took about 50 years for you to perfect this.
The methods.
The methods, but
Right.
it was a workable method all
for
throughout.
50 years ago. It was a workable method because it's so efficient
Right.
that you can do it wrong and it still works.
Wow. Wow. So my thing is, on the growth pattern now with new technologies, new things, that
it's crazy.
changes
It's
so
crazy.
much. Now you say 3 to 5 years.
Okay, well, right. Well, also think about this.
About the tools that are different today
Yeah.
than they were 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, excuse me, 50 years ago, I was still picking up a phone in some locations. And
Going like this?
No, I didn't even go like that. Look, operator, I need you to
Oh,
connect
wow. Oh, wow. Okay.
So, right,
Yeah.
I took my first company public in 1969, so that tells you how far
Yeah.
back it all
Yeah.
goes. But I maintain my enthusiasm for life, which keeps me young. And this whole idea of reinventing yourself is the realization that nothing is good forever, and that you really want to pay attention to the discomfort that you will go through making the changes in yourself to comply with what the new times require. Okay?
Music's my ears.
Right,
Let's
okay,
go.
yeah. Because if I stayed in my comfort zone, I wouldn't be doing any of this.
Right.
Okay, so I have to get out of that comfort zone, you know, almost beat myself up a little bit and
Right.
say, you know, all right, so if I stop beating myself up, the pain gets less. Now with less pain, I go do what I have to do,
Absolutely.
right? Okay. So the point is that when I say reinventing myself, I was a pioneer back in the late 1960s in the financial services industry, and this is where strategic aggregation actually was born. I didn't even have that name for it back then. I didn't know what I was doing, but this is what I did.
Okay.
Back in those days, it wasn't like today, where insurance companies and mutual fund sales and all that stuff is all tied together.
Yeah.
Okay. Back then, everything was a silo. Life insurance people only sold life insurance. Mutual fund people only sold mutual funds. Real estate only sold real estate. And if you were a person who had to wanted to invest and build your future, you were subject to who called on you, because the life insurance guy would try and convince you that life insurance would solve every problem that you got, because that's what he sold. So it was producer centric. It was designed to, the marketing methods were designed by the providers of the products for their benefit. And they just pushed it on you and hoped you bought.
Absolutely.
Okay? What I did is I turned the whole model around to a consumer-centric model. And the way we did that is we said, well, what does the consumer really need? What would make a better experience for them? Well, what if somebody sat down with the consumer and did a financial plan for them? In other words, they said, what are your assets? What's your income? How do you see your income growing over the next few years? What do you need money for? Retirement? What do you want that to look like? You want to buy a house. What is that going to look like? You got kids. You got to put them through school. How much you need for that? So you mapped out what their needs were going to be. You started with their resources that they had, the incomes that they were going to get, and then you came back with them for a plan for how they get from here to there. And it made total sense, right?
Yeah.
Now you don't have to sell anything. You don't have to push anything. These people already know this is what I want.
Right.
All right, and they're asking you, how do I get it? Well, you need some mutual funds because they'll do this for you. You need life insurance to do that for you. You should be putting some of your money in real estate because I'll give you tax deductions. And you go through the whole thing. Okay, now, so when I went to build that in the late 1960s, I couldn't.
crazy nut.
I was a crazy nut,
Yeah,
first of
I was
all.
a nut.
And what I did was I formed a company and we started acquiring all those financial services. And so figure, we own them, right? So we're going to just tell our people, here's what we want you to do.
Right. Didn't work out.
No, okay. That's where I ran headlong into this wall called human psychology. Okay? People are creatures of habit.
Right.
They don't want to change. They like doing what they do. And they're jealous of anybody who could possibly compete with them. Okay? Now, that's human nature. It's going to be there. It was there 5,000 years ago when they wrote the Bible, and it's there now. Okay? And it ain't going away. So if you're building a business model that doesn't take into account the psychology of people, then you're building a failure model. It's not going to work.
Right.
Okay, so what we learned when we built this model is it wasn't going to work.
Right.
So the life insurance guy was no way he's going to introduce the mutual fund guy,
Right.
and there's no way he's going to want to learn about mutual funds because it's not his thing. So it didn't matter what the pitch was to get in front of the client. When they got there, they all wanted to sell their own thing.
Right. Hold that thought, because we're going to come back and I want to get into, first of all, the formula to reinvent yourself. Secondly, how this failure turned to a success in the story that you're going to tell me. And thirdly, what am I going to do? I'm going to give you a story and you take me through the process of starting, growing, or expanding my company. That's all next when we come back on Grant Cardone TV. I am Stacey A. Cross, and there is no E in my name, and I'm here with Mr. Gordon Bizar, and we're talking business on a yacht. Awesome interview I am having with Mr. Gordon Bizar. And before, I didn't mention it, we jumped right over it, but you've worked with Tony Robbins,
Yes.
You've worked with Jay Abrahams, you did infomercials, international well-known speaker around strategic aggregation, personality traits, just a whole bit of it, business acquisition. I mean, like I said, I read your bio before, and I'm just like amazed at every point of interest that I'm interested in. You have some value to give on everything. So you lived a well-diverse life in business. I think you touched all areas.
Well, thank you.
And I appreciate you sitting here and giving value to our audience today, the Comfort Killers on Grant Cardone TV. And you were telling us a story about how you failed at purchasing all these companies,
Right.
And then figuring out what you needed to really do in order to see this strategic aggregation formula out. What did you have to do?
Well, remember, this is going back to the very origins of strategic aggregation.
Right.
It hadn't even been named or technically invented yet.
Absolutely.
So we owned all these companies, and we thought because we were the owners that we could just tell our people, this is what we want you to do.
Right.
And psychologically, it doesn't work because people want to do what they've always done. They don't want to change.
Right.
They're uncomfortable changing. And
Stuck.
if your model means you have to change other people's behavior patterns, your model will fail. And I proved it. I know that's what happens. But what I learned in that process was not only that we had to create something different that wouldn't change people's behavior patterns, I had to learn how to do that. And the way we did it back in 1969 is we created a new person that never existed before. Today, there's a name for that person. They're actually called a certified financial planner, a CFP.
I know some people that are certified.
Certified financial planners.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you are now looking at the guy who was part of the invention of that back in 1969
Awesome.
at an airport in Chicago.
Awesome. You're a pioneer.
Yes, I am.
And it was, well, there was nothing to reference, so I know you were probably like, how do I do it? So it was all innovative.
Yeah,
really.
yeah, you had to innovate.
Yeah.
You had to innovate. But getting back to the specifics,
Yeah.
okay? So remember in my story earlier, we had the life insurance guy, we had the mutual fund guy, we had the real estate guy, all of them, they just wanted to sell their own product. And the fact that they had lots of products to sell and could do this financial plan, if they did a financial plan, it was only to show how much life insurance could be bought.
Right.
Or only to show how much mutual funds could be
Right.
bought. Because they all had an agenda, and they wanted to make it to what they knew and they were comfortable with. And it didn't matter that we cross-trained them, didn't matter that we cross-licensed them, they always went back to doing what they were comfortable with and wanted to do. So we invented this person called the Certified Financial Planner. And the whole idea of that person is that was the person now that we built into the sales force. They were the people that we sent out to call on the client, who then went through the financial planning and then pulled from our various businesses the
Right.
products that were supposed to be right for the client.
Right.
Okay? So until we invented that third person, it just didn't work.
Yeah.
Okay.
You bought up all the
All right,
products.
Now, just to show you the difference between what that was and strategic aggregation today. Now, there are many differences, but I'll show you the main one. Okay, we have one salesperson who has to bill their clients, but they now have 3 revenue sources. They have 3 products to sell, and they can do a better job for their client. Okay? Compare that to today's model, where we have 20 partners, each with their own client base, all making each other the benefits of their client base, okay, and we're leveraging off of their capital with a business that's already built and already capitalized, already earning money, already successful, already having a reputation, and we don't have to start anything.
Right.
We don't have to educate the prospect to anything. We just have to do a better job for them with people that are already established, so we're leveraging everybody else's capital, everybody else's database, everybody else's everything to give them all more money.
This is smart. This is You're a genius, actually.
But it took 50 years to be a genius.
It took 50 years. And that's, you know what, and it goes back to being on this yacht, and I know you've seen that we changed a little scenery here. We had to. It's a beautiful day. We're in Fort Lauderdale,
right.
And it's about the details, and it's about how long it takes to build a business. But you didn't quit when you didn't understand it. 1969, right?
Nope.
You didn't quit.
Nope.
You saw something and knew that someone had to be there. You just created that person.
Right.
And now it's actually it's so good. You're so good at what we do. Mm-hmm. As far as strategic aggregation, it could work in different
any industry.
Industry. So, of course, throughout that time, since 1969, you had to reinvent yourself.
Right.
I'm interested in that because I believe 100% you have to reinvent yourself for new modern technology, for new industry, for whatever. But there's some core things that you would like to keep. How did you go about reinventing yourself all the way from starting your first business all the way till now?
I'm going to give you two answers.
Okay.
Okay. One of them is the broad answer, and the other one's a micro answer that anybody can take tomorrow and go use for themselves.
Yes.
All right. The broad answer is, whatever I was in, I accepted the fact that it had a lifetime, and the lifetime wasn't my lifetime.
Oh, wow.
It was the lifetime of the project, the lifetime of the industry, the lifetime of the method, and that eventually things would change. Technology would change them, demographics would change them. So the first thing I did is I asked myself, what's the most major transitional power in the world I live in? And I experienced it when I was in kindergarten. And what I experienced was, when I was in kindergarten, there were 10 or 12 kids in my class. When I went to first grade, there were 10 or 12 kids in my class, but in kindergarten there were 50. Okay? And then every year after me is called the baby boom.
Right.
They stacked up behind me in huge numbers. And there weren't enough schools, there weren't enough apparel manufacturers, there weren't enough anything for the baby boom because nobody expected them.
Right.
And nobody took the time to get out in front of that generation and say, well, as they age, what will they need? Right?
Yeah.
So right back in grade school, I had this awareness that there's this big generation behind me that is never going to have what I have.
Wow.
Okay? So that I would then look and say, well, what do I do? What do I need? And they're going to need it in the next couple of years. Okay? So I built my whole business on the total predictability of what changes would occur just from that demographic alone. So, for example, when the boomers came into their teens, what industry exploded? The record business, right? Because that's when they're at an age when they buy records.
Right.
So I not only knew it was going to happen, because I knew when I bought records, now I knew they would buy records and the demands would be way bigger because it's a bigger generation, right? So then I stopped looking at the time when I stopped buying records. I stopped buying records when I was in my 20s, early 20s, okay? Because it's not the same, your needs change.
Yeah.
So I also intuited that what's going to happen is this generation is going to stop buying records. So I knew I don't want to invest or do things there because that's going to be a shrinking industry.
Yeah.
So then I asked myself, well, okay, what do people in their 30s do that they didn't do in their teens and their 20s? And I only had to look at myself. What am I doing different? Okay, and so whatever that was, I knew what the trend was going to be. Because I got in front of the trend and I let the wave carry me. And it's the same thing where instead of inventing a parade, okay, I just found a parade, the baby boomers, and I got in front of it with a big flag and said, "Follow me."
Yeah, I'm the one. I know.
Okay, and so I just made sure that I would get a sense of where that demographic was going to be different than the one before it, and that enabled me to predict all the growth trends. Now, that formula is running out, okay, because the boomers are now into their retirement years, and so healthcare is a big thing, vitamin supplementation is a big thing. In other words, look at what people do as they get older to preserve their youth, to preserve their energy, to address the fact that their tastes and ideas and values have all changed since they were younger, right? So you get in front of that. All right, but the ability to get in front of the baby boom generation anymore is over.
Right.
Okay, they're at the point now where we know they need health care, and I hate to say this, but eventually they need mortuary services too, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so all the things we know where that is, but it's coming to a conclusion at this point.
Right.
Okay, so now you got to look at millennials. Okay, where are the millennials? What are they going to be doing as they start to age? And that's how you start to get in front of those trends coming along. Okay? So every time I would reinvent myself, I would just ask myself the simple question, okay, the boomers are getting older, their values are going to change, their needs are going to change, what are they going to want that the generation before them wanted when they were that age?
Right.
And then I moved into that, let that wave carry me forward, so I was always in a growth environment.
Wow. I mean, that makes total sense. And
Yeah.
now looking at it, we're at the forefront of millennials just by a year or two. I am.
Right.
And so I could really tell their position, but guess what? They grew up with different technology based than I am.
Totally different.
So, how do you stay in front of a group, of a generation, when it's so different?
Well, I let them educate me just like I educate them. I look at the value that I bring to them is a knowledge of psychology, people, business principles, ways of leveraging and financing money.
Yeah.
What I don't bring to them is technology and the use of technology. That's where I let them bring what they know to me. Okay, so I know where I'm good and I know where I'm not good, and I have no problem sitting down with a millennial and saying, can you teach me how to use this machine on my, got in my lap here?
And they probably look at you and, could you teach me strategic aggregation?
There you go. So there's an exchange of values. But what I remain open to it. A lot of people, they get uncomfortable with the new technology, so they build a wall between themselves and the use of that technology, okay, because they don't want to get in that discomfort zone. You can't do that. Not if you want to continue to be successful.
Keep growing,
Now, the other thing I told you that I would share with you is not only my macro method of how do I reinvent myself, but there's also a micro method, which is very effective today as well. When I look at my graduates, I have 300,000 graduates around the world from my finance programs, where I train people how to leverage and buy businesses. And when I look at the guys who are really successful, there's a common theme that I see in almost all of them. And here's the formula that they use. First of all, doing research today, is very easy because you use Google, you use, oh man, I mean, it's not like when I was a kid, you got to go to the library, you got to sit down with the librarian, and what book do I pull off? Right, okay, and then where in the book is this?
Yeah, the database.
Right, yeah. Well, but you didn't have an index where you just type in the word and it goes right to that, right? Okay, and that didn't exist. Okay, you had to actually do research.
Right.
Okay, well today it's really easy. And so what are the major trends in a field? So whatever their field is, that's fine. But in that field, what is it that is growing? Okay, and then who is it that the buyers are? Okay, now once you know what's trending, then you know what you want to have as your product or service to beat that. Okay, now the question is, where are those folks hanging out?
Right.
Okay,
Where the people are.
Right, are they on social media? Are they hanging out in coffee shops? I mean, where are they?
Yes.
Okay, and then the next thing you have to do is that you market to them through today's channels or whatever channel they have. In other words, if I'm marketing to a baby boomer, I don't market the same way.
Right, absolutely.
Right, okay. So now you've done the research, you know what the hot products are. And now the idea in business today is you do not want to have bricks and mortar and machinery and equipment and employees and inventory and warehouses and shipping department. You don't want all that. Because to build all that today is very, very expensive. What you want to do is take advantage of the fact that that stuff's all out there. You don't have to invent anything, okay? You just have to apply it to your new product or whatever it is that you want to do. I will guarantee you in almost any field that develops a product that there are contract manufacturers out there who would make it not only for you, but they make it for a lot of other companies, and like Motorola. Motorola doesn't make any of its own stuff. It's all made by manufacturers in Singapore and Hong Kong.
So we can tap into that.
Right. So the idea of these contract manufacturers are all out there. So there's somebody that can already make the product. Okay, there's a company like an Amazon, okay, where they'll warehouse it for you, they'll distribute it for you, they'll take the orders for you, they'll promote their client base that they have already to buy your product or service. You can work with them to do that. So you identify the right platform, you identify the right partners, you identify the right manufacturers, and you pull all those pieces together. Okay? And now you don't need massive amounts of capital to do that, okay, because all these businesses are already capitalized. There's fees you might have to pay.
Right.
So there's the case where maybe you have to get your $10,000 or $50,000 together to make all those pieces fit.
Right.
But you don't have
You don't have to go out and reinvent the wheel.
You don't have to reinvent the wheel, and you don't have to go out and get $2 million
to get a big factory to develop.
Right. Yeah. So you take your head out of that place, and then you've limited to some extent your profit margins, because these people all have to make money. But so what?
So what?
They're carrying the capital burden. They're carrying all
overhead,
the burden. Right. They're carrying the aggravation too, because you don't have any employees to deal with. Life is simple, right? Okay.
So you're saying more simplified ways to get, and probably even more results out of just the traditional mindset of building a business.
I mean, just think of yourself out in your backyard trying to get a client versus having Amazon as your platform, who already has all the clients on the planet.
I think it's just a mindset switch.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I believe you told me a story about having a movie on a DVD, on a CD, and it took about $130 million to make this movie.
Right.
But your mindset said, man, they spent all this money to entertain me.
And for $12 bucks, I got $130 million of output.
Look at $130 million of output with a company like Amazon. With the customers there. They're feeding customers in that box.
Right.
All I have to do is get the product in the customer.
Right, and you do have to have a good product.
Yeah.
Okay, you do have to have that.
That still doesn't, that's not out
That part doesn't change. So when you're with your contract all right, now the question, how do you get these folks? Well, it's all research. It's all research. There isn't anything you want to know today that isn't on the net.
Right.
Nothing. From who's good at what to who's bad at what to who does what. It's all out there. And so by just doing that level of research, by understanding through research what the trends are, knowing what the right product is that's going to push you with it as it grows, getting the contract manufacturers who can put in the quality that you need, because the one thing will kill you, and it doesn't matter if you're with Amazon or not, if your quality of your product isn't good, you're going to get returns. Amazon isn't going to want to carry you anymore.
And you get that chargeback.
You're right. And all of a sudden the margins just went out the window. So you can't have that. You've got to have something that people like, that they will reorder.
But if you're doing your research, you should have
that. Right. Okay. So it's all about sweat capital at that point. Okay.
Sweat equity, huh?
Yeah. You're not buying this stuff.
Right.
The research, you just got to roll up your sleeves. That's why I keep my sleeves rolled up.
Oh man, I don't have any sleeves. That's why.
Yeah. So you're gonna put in the sweat capital, but when you're finished, you're going to be able to prove to anybody whose help you need, I've done the research. Here's the trend. Here's the buying. Here's the market space. Here are the contract manufacturers. Here's who makes it. Here's their quality. Awesome. And you go through every single point. Now, you've made it impossible for, if you need help raising some money or something, you've made it impossible for people to say no. They know you've done your homework.
Right.
They're so excited about seeing all the facts and details in place. They can't wait to back you.
Well, Gordon, you've given me so much value, and I know I have a question for you, and I hope you can answer it. I don't know where, because I seem like every question I ask you, you're ready, you're surefire. I think I have one that'll probably stump you a bit.
Oh my God!
And we're gonna bring Grant. I know, probably. We're gonna bring Grant Cardone into space. We're gonna pretend Grant Cardone is sitting right here next to me. He's always talked about it. He spoke about it multiple times. I've heard him say that he wants to take his real estate company public, right? So if Grant Cardone comes to Mr. Gordon Bizar and says, Gordon, what would be the best strategy for me to take my company public? What would you say to Grant Cardone?
Okay.
Funny you should ask.
I didn't stump you?
No.
Oh my.
I'm ready.
All right.
I'm ready.
Let's go.
All right. Well, here's the real estate model for today.
Yeah.
Okay. Not 20 years ago.
Okay.
Not 10 years ago.
Okay.
Not even last year.
All right.
This is it.
Today.
State of the art, man.
Okay.
State of the art.
Yeah.
Okay. You're going to take a company public. The first thing you got to ask yourself is what creates value in the public marketplace. It's not assets like real estate. People don't buy a public company because it's got assets. They buy it because it has earnings. Okay, and the companies are sold on something called a PE ratio, price earnings.
Okay.
So let's say a company makes $1 million in net, okay, and it sells at 20 times earnings in the marketplace. That's a $20 million company in value.
Oh wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Because it's 20 times their PE. So when you're buying stock in the company, you take all the stock of the company, you divide it into $20 million, and every share is worth that fraction amount.
Gotcha.
Okay, and that's how it gets priced. It's based on an industry-wide price earnings multiple applied to that company. Okay? So, if Mr. Cardone wanted to go public,
and he does.
Okay, he would go to somebody like a Morgan Stanley or a Goldman Sachs,
Yeah.
okay, and they would look at his numbers and they would decide, okay, if we took your company public, here's what it would be, and Grant would sit there and he would say, well, okay, it's worth more that way than it is just with my asset values,
Yeah.
so I'm going to do that, okay, and he's leaving 90% of the money on the table when he does it, okay, all right, here's the other 90% of the money. You take your real estate company and you break it up into two companies, okay, one company owns the real estate. One company leases the real estate at a below market rate of rental. This company then releases it at the market rates and makes a lot of money.
Right.
Okay, this is the company you take public because it's got nothing but earnings, no assets.
Right.
The assets are over here.
Okay.
Then you have investors in these assets who want to own it because of the tax write-off, who want to own it
Sure
because
thing.
eventually it will be sold, and then when it's sold, they get their appreciation.
Yeah, because the assets are there.
The assets are there.
Yeah.
Okay, so you take the typical real estate investor and you put them on this side,
Right.
and then you take the public and you put them on this side, and now you not only have the asset value here, which
Right.
still has the asset value,
Right.
but you've created this public entity which is now going to sell at, let's say, 20 times earnings, and it has no assets.
Right. Wow. Because you
Okay.
don't need it to
Right.
go public.
Okay. So you created two entities that together have 90% to 100 to 300% more value than if you kept them together and took it public.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make sure Grant Cardone sees that, because I don't know if anyone actually told him that. Because I think traditionally when we take a company public or we want to think in that, we go with the traditional route.
Yes.
And business, what I've learned today with you is that there's a traditional route if you want to go down a narrow road and,
Right.
and grind and have your one pizza shop
And
in
have
the
lots
corner.
of have lots of competition.
Have lots of competition. You could grow a business and just do it up to that point where you're in your core competency, where you have your skill set, and then you sell it and get that off and do it again. So
Right.
you're just a happy person.
Right.
And then you could really take your business and self on a super highway of growth, and I believe that's what the strategic aggregation.
It is. It's
So
a
you-
super highway.
Yeah, it's a super highway of growth. So now we covered these three areas of how we could start and grow and explode a business.
Right.
And you've done that all with, I believe, one or two, three little key principles.
Right.
So could you leave with our audience today? If there's people out there that's ready, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't know how to find their skill set. They don't know how to grow a business. They're stuck in the one pizza shop around the corner. I think
Right.
that's where I'm going to stay with this, to see how they could develop and move off of that block
Right.
and explode and expand.
Okay.
So the one pizza shop guy, all right, he's been at it 10 years. He loves making pizzas.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get this one in and out of a strategic, like get them to blow up their space? How do we do that?
Okay.
Because it's
Well,
brick and mortar.
Yeah, you said you wanted to stump me?
I want to
You're close.
Ooh.
Okay, and the reason you're close is because most people are where they are because of their mindset. Okay, the fellow who's got one pizza shop and loves making pizza, he's happy making pizza.
Leave him alone.
Okay, and he may not have it in his mind that he wants to be the owner of 250 pizza shops, right?
Yeah.
Okay, if he did, he'd be he wouldn't stay working at making a pizza.
Yeah.
Okay, a lot of times people who are good at a business or a trade or a profession, the reason they go into the business is not because they want to get wealthy. They go into that business because they think they know more than their boss now. They don't like working for somebody else. They like the idea of being in control of their own time and that they don't have to report to anybody. And the fact that they now have their own little business where they make their own life, they do what they love doing, it's already at the level of what they want. Okay, that most of those folks really are not motivated to go much higher. If you're motivated to go much higher, if you're one of the few that are motivated to go higher, here's how you have to make that transition. You have to think to yourself, what's my passion? What do I love more than anything? And to do that, you may have to get your head out of the space you're working in now, because you may not like what you do now. Okay, you have to get it back to when you were a kid. You know, what made you happy? Before all the adults in your life told you you you're a dreamer, you're
Yeah.
never going to be able to do that, you know, you don't have the skill sets, you don't have the
playing
knowledge.
with cars and Tonga.
Right, yeah, so you were discouraged, and they didn't mean you any harm.
Right.
They just didn't want you to be disappointed in life, right? So
protecting you.
Right, but eventually you gave up on those passions and those dreams because you were told you had to go this way to make your way in life. What I ask people to do is go back to those dreams they had when they were kids. Back when you had no capability of making those dreams real.
Right.
But get in touch with them, because they're the core of who you are. They really are the core of who you are. And then bring yourself forward. Okay, I'm not that person anymore. I have core competencies. I have skill sets. I've had a certain amount of training. There's things that I now know how to do. And what's more is there are places out there that can teach me what I don't know.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I got to get my head back into that passion and start to think of, all right, what do I really want to do with my life? When they write that epitaph on my gravestone, what's it going to say? Okay, what is it going to tell people about my life and what I contributed and what I did? That is the most important thing that you can get in touch with, because that is the power that you have inside you. It's the driving force that will take you through all the obstacles, because you're going to hit them, to that ultimate success. But once you find it, you're already a step ahead of the game. Then the next thing you have to do is say, okay, within that field that I'm passionate about, okay, how do I find the trends? How do I get in front of those trends? How do I do the research that gives me all the right pieces to pull into place?
Right.
How can I enjoy pulling those pieces together, orchestrating those
Right.
pieces to that bigger thing? And then how do I build it around a business model that gives everybody a piece for themselves, okay, that they want? Two things I always tell an entrepreneur. Okay, people think an entrepreneur is somebody who takes risk.
Yeah.
No.
No.
An entrepreneur is really good. He doesn't take any risk. Okay, what an entrepreneur is, and this is my definition of an entrepreneur, it's a person it's a person who has a vision, who orchestrates the time, talent, and resources of other people to make their vision real.
Wow.
Okay, and it's built on a corollary, and the corollary is this: that anything you would ever want is out there already. Somebody already has it, and they will give it to you if you give them what they want. We're sitting on a beautiful yacht today, 163-foot yacht, $27 million value
Yes.
on this yacht. Okay, I need it. I call up my yacht partner and I tell him what I'm doing, and he says, "Don't worry, Gordon. Just come on down to Fort Lauderdale, and it's right there for you." Okay, why does he make this available to me? Because in our partnership, I give him what he needs to get out of these transactions.
Wow.
So I don't need to own the yacht. I can have the yacht anytime I want it, because I give value to somebody else in the way that they want value. The beauty of a business is it's multifaceted, and it gives you the ability to structure your business so that everyone you want the help of, you can structure it so that they win when you win. Okay?
So there's a win-win scenario situation always going on.
And when we put together a business, we want to know the client wins, because if they don't win, it's not going to happen.
Right.
That our partners are going to win, our investors are going to win, our salespeople are going to win, our employees are going to win. Whatever. Everybody's got to have a win here that's bigger and better than it would be anyplace else. And the only way that happens is if you've reinvented yourself and you're now creating new value that didn't exist before. So there's no pie to split up.
Right.
We just make a bigger pie that everybody gets to use.
I love you. I mean, I absolutely learned 3 things today in these principles. That sometimes we're pushing against a wall that we need not.
Yes.
Because there's a door right there.
Cool.
Right? There's a door. There's a door right over there.
Very cool.
And then it's the value. It's all about the value that we bring, and of course, an exchange, right? So we're always in exchange of value. Right. And thirdly, it could be done simpler ways and give you the same, if not even more, results.
Right.
So I appreciate learning those 3 valuable lessons, and I appreciate sharing with Grant Cardone how to explode his business. I appreciate my comfort killers watching. I've been invited here in Fort Lauderdale, and I've been kind of keeping this meeting a secret, because you know when you have something, you really want to give it in the right format when people are ready. And I think now is the time where people are ready to learn that sometimes there's a million models, there's a million ways to do things, right? And then you find people like Gordon that's been doing it forever. All right, and forever, and been loving exactly what you're doing every day. That's keeping you getting up 5:30 in the morning, getting a good night rest though.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like when you were 30, but actually getting up and willing to teach more and provide more value. And that says to me, Stacy, damn, you're not doing enough. Damn. And it just keeps me up, and I know that's what it's going to do for our Comfort Killers on Grant Cardone TV, because you provided so much value here that I could really wrap this up and sell it. I really can, but we're not going to do that. We're gonna give it in the way that we intended it to give, and see about that value exchange coming back to us. So I want to thank you again for inviting me on this beautiful Casino Royale is the name of the yacht, and it's for sale. And I'm not gonna lie, it's a beautiful boat. It's the attention to detail in every aspect here tells me so much about you and the attentional detail that you wanted to prepare this meeting for, and bring my whole family here and my partners and my whole strategic aggregation here.
Right.
And it tells me the type of person you are, and you wooed me today.
Well, thank you.
And I appreciate that.
And likewise, by the way,
Yeah.
I genuinely appreciated your questions. They were fantastic.
Thank you.
They had the right perspective to them,
Thank
and
you.
I was privileged to be able to share it with you and your audience.
Are you a comfort killer?
I am so comfort, and I'm so killed by it.
I am Stacey A. Cross, and there is no E in my name. Thank you. Until next time on the Comfort Killers.